So, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly. This week with us, we have Richa Daga, someone who has a very long experience in many aspects from IoT to IEEE computing, telecoms, and a lot of outside of pure technology work and experience. So, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Yuka. So pleasure is on mine. Glad to be here at the ClueCon Weekly Show.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about yourself, what you've been doing, what you do currently?
Yeah, sure. And before beginning with that, since we are meeting up in the beginning of the year, I want to wish you a very happy new year and to our entire community of viewers too. And hope you had a
Awesome.
nice,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, thank you. And hope you had a nice holiday season. And now everyone is back and geared up for the wonderful technological advancements that are yet to happen in this year.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Yeah, let's get started with the right foot because 2021 is going to be a great year, I think.
Yes, completely. So, a little about me. So, I'm Richa Daga. I'm working as a software engineer at Cisco, and I am passionate about technologies and chipsets that connect the world. So, I can say that I'm a global technical speaker, author, mentor, and an engineer by heart with my master's in engineering in network systems. So currently, I'm associated with Cisco, and prior to joining Cisco, I had worked at Ciena for more than 7 years on the development of products on packet optical technologies from scratch. So I have worked in the development of data plane area for the bring up of line cards, field programmable gate arrays, DSP, and ASIC device drivers. And also, along with the development team, I have also been a part of the customer response team with our customers all across the globe. So now I'm close to completing a decade of work experience in research and development and contributing to cutting edge projects since the beginning of my career. And it absolutely feels great that when I began working, I was playing with line cards supporting few Mbps of data, like very little speed data, DS1s or even T1s, and then saw the technological evolution firsthand as got to work on the hardware, supporting the bandwidth progression that we are seeing right now, like from few Mbps to 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig, 400 gig, and then 800 gig, and now we are working to support up to terabits of data.
Yeah.
And apart from my exciting routine of development that I do, I have authored technical articles on smart cities, and they have got published in IEEE newsletters and Global Enterprise Viewpoint publication.
Wow,
So,
that's a lot. Thank you for. Yeah, there's so many questions that come to mind. I'd like to ask you that. I'll just start with one and see where it takes us. We've
sure.
seen an acceleration in the not even the adoption, the actual presence of technology with 5G, with other. There's more connected devices than any time ever. First of all, what do you think is driving that? Are the telecoms finally getting out of their 80s ways of living and doing things differently, or is it being driven by something else? Like why is all of a sudden seems like things are moving this fast? What is enabling that?
Yeah. So I think the enabler of that are actually the technologies themselves, because we are progressing in one technology and that gets its drive from the other technologies booming up in the other areas as well. So I think it's a key role is of the other technologies that I will just tell you in brief right now. And another thing that I can say is what accelerated this development is, of course, the pandemic COVID-19, I can say. So, as for the statistics, we can say that across the globe, as the pandemic kicked in, the traffic spiked by 25% to 45%. And then most of the companies, they encouraged their employees to work remotely. So, all of these things with more devices connecting, more entities going virtual, and more services now online. So, this is most of the key reason that there's a bandwidth boom which is happening right now. And another thing is 5G, IoT, machine to machine communication, autonomous cars, the rise in video data. Like we all want to stream data now at very high bandwidth of speed. So everything from every nook and corner with every connected device. Like if we would just talk about ourselves right now, you and me, we would be
Mhm.
connected to different devices right now sitting at our homes. So the number of devices have increased a lot, and everything in combined is giving rise to a bandwidth boom, which is like staying in front of us right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the demand and requirements are going hand to hand for sure.
Yes.
There's something that comes up too. The which from someone who is in. So I come from a totally different background. I've been an application developer and systems architect since forever. So I generally build platforms around. I live in a level above yours in a sense, like more
Yeah,
of a software and feature driven thing. And
yeah,
what
yeah.
so with all this explosion of data and connected devices, how do we make sure privacy and security are maintained? What's the what should we look for as a community to avoid things like what happened with Facebook at the beginning and still going on, I will say, and that's data being used for something that's not their actual usage
Yeah.
destination.
Yeah, yeah. So everything, like a very important point that you mentioned here, cyber security, we can say
Mm,
that. And I also gave a talk on that in my one of the IoT Slam presentation that I did, which was all around encryption and how
mm,
that there can be hackers and stealers prying on our data right now. So for that, it depends upon what are the technologies that we are choosing. So if I speak from my background, where like when we see data, we see okay, the data is going from maybe routers we hear about, but everything goes onto all the layers of the OSI model. If I would relate to what we learned in engineering, so the physical layer, the data link layer, the network layer. So at the physical layer where the data is just bits, zeros and ones, and it is passing through the optical fibers, so there can be a optical fiber tap as well. So that is very important, that all the layers like the L0, L1 for from which data is passing needs to be protected. And for that we have different technologies at the packet optical layer. One is optical transport network. So in OTN, on which I work a lot, there is OTN encryption. So that needs to be enabled. So if customers are choosing different vendors for making their data pass through different data centers, they should ensure that they are having OTN encryption at the physical layer, then MAC security, MACsec, IPsec. All these
mm.
securities should be enabled so that our data is protected. And once in a while, things do happen, but everything needs to be ensured that we are doing our best in choosing the best technologies and the best possible hardware which is available, so that the data remains protected over the internet.
I see. So yeah, so it feels like for now security for the end users and someone who's just bought a new device, etc. The main thing is looking for reputable vendors. Really, like we're
Yes, yes.
going to for a few years. I totally agree with that. For the next few years, it's going to be about the brand names, like
Yeah.
without naming any brands, but I mean, what I'm talking to. I'm talking about you know a couple. You work for one of those, but I mean, Cisco is one of those. Yeah, for a while there will be, because otherwise you end up. It's really risky. Like having a device you carry it all time, and I don't know, just broadcasting your position in real time. That has so many implications, so many that it's. I mean, cell phones do that, but cell phones have a. I will say maybe you don't. Maybe you agree with this. The operating system security that phones have is a good paradigm to start from. Like generally, phones make a good job of telling you what they're doing with the data, what's not.
Yeah.
Then maybe not everything, but they're,
Yeah, they do tell us at a user level, but the actual data which is going, it is actually under the oceans as well. When we have those submarine cables which are connecting across continents. So even when you and me are talking to each other, there is like, or an email which we receive, everything is under the ocean. Not much of the satellites that we see. More than 99% goes under the oceans. So that
so
data also needs to be protected.
So this is so interesting. I have to ask you, like again, as a software architect, my data comes by magic. It just comes from somewhere. It's magical. Uh, Comes from somewhere, and it never. I really never noticed what the where they end up. So so you mentioned submarine cables. Everybody
Yeah.
seems to say that sync the data goes over satellites. So you're saying that's not
Yeah,
true?
yeah,
Oh,
that's
cool.
not
I was completely wrong about that. Great. So people in the audience, don't worry.
true.
So
Yeah.
how does it work? Like how does it ultimately work?
Yeah, so actually, what happens is that is something which even I believed without working in my industry, that everything is across this superhero satellites that is carrying all the data. But but now when I know is that the statistics say that about 99% of the data that we see is through the submarine cables under the ocean bed, and they are deep under the ocean. So that's why when you go for scuba or anything, you don't come across those cables in the oceans because they are on the seabed, lying under the seabed. So those cables actually they are connecting the different data centers, and there's a lot more technologies that we have the SLTE, that submarine terminals which are there, and we also have like wet beds. So like on the terrestrial system we have different modems, like for modulation and demodulation, and we also have our optical fibers under the ocean bed, and a lot of different technologies. One such very important technology is coherent optics, which is a buzzword right now in our industry, in the telecom world, because of the bandwidth explosion that we see. There have been optical fibers since the beginning, but now because the bandwidth demand has increased so much, we want to transmit more and more data through the optical fibers that we were having. So for that, we it wasn't possible because we reached the limit of the Shannon capacity limit which was there. So that's when another technologies came into picture, and we had the coherent optics, on which Cisco has a bigger portfolio in coherent optics, as well as my previous company Ciena. So all that in terms of coherent optics, as well in the submarine industry we have spatial division multiplexing, which now are deploying cables which have, like, earlier we used to have six fiber pairs in one cable, in one optical fiber cable under the seabed. But now, with this new technology, spatial division multiplexing, modern submarine cables are giving up to 12 to 16 fiber pairs. And one such first SDM, this new technology that has come up, it's single transatlantic 6400 kilometers Dunant cable, which supports up to 250 terabits per second of overall capacity.
Wow.
So yeah, so to address this bandwidth explosion, there's a lot going under the background, not only in the terrestrial world, but also in the aquatic, in the under the sea world. So everywhere, I think to enable 5G or to enable your AR, VR, IoT, we need to have a robust communication infrastructure everywhere, wherever passes in that wireline infrastructure.
Well, that's super interesting. Now now I know what I'm doing after I'm done working for the day. I'm researching how those cables are laid down and how I mean, suppose it's a large undertaking. I have one of my, I wouldn't even say a hobby or interest, like things I like to look at are large machinery, that kind of things,
Yes.
ships, etc. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm certainly going to look it up. Yeah, the
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting
And
that. And
one,
how many of
uh,
those cables are there? Just
yeah,
curious to
there
know.
Yeah, so there are a lot many cables. Like I'm not able to recollect the entire statistic
I
right
mean,
now, but I have it with me. I would just share it with you in some time. But the longest submarine cable that I remember, so that is around 39,000 kilometers in length, the
wow,
longest cable that we have. And there's a statistic like it is about 1/10 of the distance from the Earth to the moon. It's such a long cable that is laid
wow.
under the that is laid under the sea.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, someone coming from a different background, even if they're technical, you generally tend to think data is traveling overhead and
Yeah.
whatever.
So yeah, so I think Antarctica, we still have satellites working for us because there the submarine cables have not been still able to reach. But for other places, we do have that big submarine cable map. If you will Google and see, there's a lot many cables connecting the different continents. Even Facebook, Google, they have their own cables as well
Oh
because
wow.
it's very important right now.
It feels like it's a larger scale scenario to what you have with the 5G and in general for cell towers. So I'm connected through a satellite. I'm using Starlink, and it's working pretty well. But I suppose Starlink has huge backhaul stations on the ground
Yeah,
that
yeah,
ultimately do the actual data transfer. Same way like 5G has to have cable based backhaul essentially, otherwise it doesn't work. So
yes, yes.
there's a lot there. It's super interesting. Last thing about technology before I ask you about a topic that's very near to my heart for various reasons. That is
Yeah.
women in tech and inclusiveness. Do you think the explosion of edge computing and moving servers and services closer to users on in 5G is a real technology advancement, or is it more of the new 3D television? Like, is it something we're going to do for 6 months and then move stuff back to the huge cloud servers somewhere?
No, no. So I don't think we are moving back right now, and we are not actually moving back. We are working together with the past as well. So it's not right. You get a new technology and you just move to it. And if you would say that we are talking about 5G now and 6G would also be in the horizon, 4G also exists. So if
Yeah.
you think it's time for 4G to go, the answer is no. 4G networks, they continue to coexist with 5G, offering sufficient coverage and capacity for a wide range of use cases. So all these things, like you mentioned about the backhaul, yes, we do have to have a very good backhaul where we would be aggregating the data. But along with the backhaul, there are other terms as well: the front haul, the mid haul, and then the backhaul. So putting all these three together, we call them the cross haul, like X haul. So, like when we work on it, we have to think, okay, this is the front haul. Which technologies will be used in it? How we have to carry the data from the radio to the baseband unit, and which technology? Like there's another one like CPRI, which is used there. So for the front haul, we were thinking, and then for the mid haul, which one we would be using data traffic transferring over the optical transport or the Ethernet, and then the back haul. So all of them combined, every technology, like we have to pay heed to every segment of the network and use the right hardware from the different vendors that are there in our industry, and then select. So that helps to make 5G what it is right now. So everything becomes important to enable 5G as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's still finding a place for technology takes longer than
Yes,
inventing the
yes,
technology in some cases.
yes.
Plus, telecoms have huge investments they've made in
Yeah,
previous systems. From
yeah,
coming from my pure telecom background, you probably know what IMS is. Is
yeah,
the operating system that runs most of telecoms. IMS is actually from the 90s, yeah, 94 or something like that for specification, and we still haven't seen IMS fully realized because it's
yeah,
more of a design than an actual software. So it's not
yeah,
just you buy it and deploy it and it works. So yeah, it does take time, and it takes a lot of money. It's super
yeah, yeah,
expensive to do anything.
absolutely. So
Yeah,
when I
we
started
see.
teaching, we were building a new product that had to support the legacy data as well. That's why we were taking ingress of traffic for few Mbps, because we had to serve the access network. And for the egress, we were taking data up to 100 gigi. So as you said, these technologies, we cannot just wipe them all over. It has to be incremental approaches to support the previous, and in turn with scalable to the new technologies as well.
Yeah, you can't really, even just if you go to the client side, you can't really tell people, all you guys just need to throw out your phones and buy new ones, because it's just not
Yes,
how it
yes,
works. Like, it's people will
absolutely.
just not do it, so you have to
Yeah,
work up from that. Well, that was I mean, technology is super interesting, but we all know we have, and this is very dear to my heart because of a few things. My wife has been learning to code, and she was helping me on some small projects. Uh, Women in technology, I know is something you've been doing a lot of work on, and I am close to a couple groups in Italy that do the same, and I try to help when I can. But what do you think the problem is? Like, why can't we get I know so many skilled women that could be great developers because they have the right mindset, but ended up going, I don't know, in finance or law school or medical instead of picking programming or technology in general. What's the problem? What are we doing wrong?
Yeah, so I think this exists everywhere. So coming from your geographical region or talking about my geographical region, I think
Yeah,
this
it's
exists
universal.
everywhere. Yeah, so I think women in STEM and the women in technical, the numbers are low. And this I have been feeling since the beginning. Like when I was doing my engineering graduation around 14 years back when I was a student that time. So there were like my batch of electronics and communication, we had three girls in the batch of 60.
Oh yeah,
So at that time, it really struck to me that what's wrong and why is it happening. I founded a group like there's IEEE Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineer. They have a Women in Engineering affinity group. So I started that in my college where we used to hold activities at the national level to promote girls in engineering, like organize activities for them, organize hackathons for them. This I was doing when I was in my graduation. So at that time, it just struck to me that why we are so less in number in our college. So I started a new program of going back to schools. So I connected to different elementary education and school education, like girls which are yet to decide that which field they have to take, whether science or arts. So I went to their principals and talked to them that I want to educate these girls and show them the laboratories in my college so that they feel excited about it and then they choose STEM as a career, as a field for them. So I think some differences have to be made at the grassroots level as well, so that we have women taking up these subjects in school. And then when they enter college, then they should be excited enough about what the technology is about. Like this has been very close to my heart because I have been associated with women in engineering in my when I joined my companies in corporate. So I was an integral member of women at Ciena, and we have held many activities to reach schools and to promote women in tech and women in STEM. And apart from that, I'm also a member of Women in IoT Center of Excellence panel that we have in our IoT Slam conferences. So and along with that, I'm also a member of the She Speaks Bureau, because the vision was that when I speak in conferences myself and I see the speaker lineup, I see like three, four women across the speaker lineup is there. Not more than that, sometimes even lesser. So we started an initiative of She Speaks Bureau to power female speakers globally. And then we have regular events on clubhouses, and we hold She Speaks Slam so that we can have women enter the community and learn more about tech and take up STEM career.
yeah.
So that's close to me as
I've been involved with ClueCon at various levels for lot of
okay.
years now, more than I've been at SignalWire. And that's always been an issue. Like we try to look for as much diversity as we can in speakers,
Yeah.
but you simply don't have the people. Like even if you go look
Yes.
really hard, we end up bothering the same three or four women we know that are great speakers. Can you count this year too, please? But it's not easy. Yeah, figuring out a
Yeah.
way to so what I know, I do. So I have two daughters, and one of them is 10, and she's recently learned how to code some Python.
Okay,
And
great.
she wants to be an engineer. So while she's 10, she's in time for changing her mind, right? And it doesn't. She can do
Yeah.
whatever she likes, of course. But I don't really know. If someone asks me the question, what can I do today to get more diversity into the IT workplace? I don't have answers. Like all I can say is, if you want me to teach to people, I'm always happy to. But the problem
Yeah.
sometimes is getting the interest working. Like I
Yes.
think it's a critical mass type of thing. Like if you had out of 10 people in IT companies, if you get to the point where you had three women, you're good because
Yeah.
others will just come. Right now, we
Yeah.
have the same problem. This is a very similar. This is how I'm thinking about it because there's a very similar situations. I do wrestling and Brazilian jiu jitsu, not at a high level. We've been doing it for a lot of years, finding it very fun. But currently, our gym, we only have one woman, which is my wife, training with us.
Okay.
And when we had more women before COVID, before we had to close the gym, then reopen, etc. When we have a group of 3 or 4 women, we'd have get more people interested. Like they would ask, etc. Right
Okay.
now, people walk by from the other rooms in the gym, see a lot of burly men and one small woman. She's actually not very, she's quite strong, but and they don't get interested because they say, hey, that girl must be weird. So having 3 or 4 people makes it having 3 or 4 women. It's the hard part. Like having the first core, then people get interested. It's natural. It's the reverse in other sports, I'm sure, like dancing. A lot of people. I have friends. I have a friend who is a professional ballet dancer. Is
Okay.
is a man, but is being training as the only man in his dance school as long as he knows. Like his math dancers now that is a professional, but before became a professional, he's never met anyone else. We're a small town, so it's like 20 people.
Yeah,
So
I think we have been defining like women are going into dancing and men are towards the gym. So I think that's why we are seeing that ratio. But
yeah,
I'm very happy to see that like your wife is into it and you would want your girls also like whatever they like to move into. And so that's why we need male allies. So that's why what the term that we have coined. But along with the women that are there in this field, we need our men supporters as well. So
yeah,
you are an
it's
incredible
purely a
example of
matter.
that, I think.
Allies are purely a matter. We wish it wouldn't be needed, right? But allies are purely a matter of numbers. Like there's not enough women developers to teach other women developers, so you have to end up doing it. You need men to do it because honestly, it's the only people we can. But yeah, if anybody wants to apply, we have job openings, and we're looking for some people to do some very interesting system design stuff, etc. So hit me up. My email is luke@signalwire.com, and we'll be super happy just for the audience. Well, Rich,
Yeah.
it was a fantastic chat. I'm super happy to have had you here today, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. Who knows? Things
Yeah,
will happen at
yeah.
some point where we can still travel. I don't know. I haven't been to a
Yeah,
conference
yeah,
in.
absolutely. Like for the holiday season, for the Christmas and New Year, I was in Switzerland and moved to France as well just to see Paris. So if I would have gone to Italy and we would have connected before, then I would have tried to meet up.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Well, we can always meet in. But well, there's various conferences.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah, ClueCon conference. I think ClueCon also has a conference. So
yep.
before having this session with you, I was just looking up your impressive bio as well, and I would get a lot to learn from you guys as well.
We have a yearly conference in Chicago every year. This
Okay,
year was a
okay,
hybrid event because
yes,
things.
yeah.
And 2022, we're expecting it to be in person again. But I think, yeah, that's one last closing remark. Do you think this kind of hybrid event is going to stay? I think it is.
Yeah, so actually, even I have been participating in hybrid conferences now. The IoT conferences that I have participated, like they tried to move it live in person event, but since like they were having in person as ClueCon also would have it in person, but with the pandemic, so things moved to hybrid. But I think it's nice. Like I am interacting with you, and I'm happy about it. Like I
Yeah.
feel the same energy right now as well. But yeah, physical interactions would have been nicer. But yeah,
Yeah,
this can
how it
stay
feels
as
to me, how it feels to me that I was upset not being able to go into conferences in person. Then I
yeah,
realized I've been involved in 2 more conferences than usual last year because being able to watch it streaming if you have to means that maybe I can't travel. I have work to do. I have family. So
yes,
if there's a conference that's not super core to your interest, like it's but it's something you'd like to take a look at. This
yeah,
allows you to. While otherwise,
yes,
I mean, someone not super interested in ClueCon, I mean, we will not be interested in ClueCon. I don't know, but maybe someone isn't. Jokes aside, they would say, well, you know what? I'm not going to fly to Chicago because that's expensive and takes time off work, etc. But why don't I purchase an online ticket and watch these 2 talks? Why don't I
yes,
watch Richa talk because I'm interested in what she has to say and not the rest of the conference. So ultimately, it brings more people. And then since you
yeah,
have the ticket, you bought the ticket for one single talk. But then you look at the list of speakers and say, well, why don't you go listen to this other guy who maybe
Yes.
has something interesting, and you get into something new. So there is value in hybrid, and that's only made possible by explosion of bandwidth and underwater cables, which I didn't know. So I make sure I mention that next time I'm
Yeah.
live on some stage. Thank you guys for joining us from overseas. Thanks to our fantastic underwater cables. I learned all about from Richa. That's pretty cool. Well,
Yeah.
jokes aside, thank you for joining
I
us
would
today.
love to participate in ClueCon too. I would just look out when it is happening and I would never apply. And I
Oh,
hope to meet you there too again.
I'll make sure I will let you know. I'll let our so that we can let you know. We're still up in the air. It's usually end of August, but right? It's last year we ended up
Okay.
deciding, I don't know, a month before the actual event what it was going to be. So I hope 2022 is going to be a little bit easier, but we'll have more information. I'll make sure I share it in the various channels.
Okay, okay. And yeah, another thing, I would love to get connected with your wife as well. If I can do something in for the women in Italy and to make my
Oh yeah,
contribution and to
let's
learn from them.
let's exchange email addresses after the interview.
Yeah, sure,
It's going to be super
absolutely.
interesting. And anybody else who's interested, and any women would like to start coding or start playing with hardware, that's something
Yeah,
we always underestimate. But right now, getting started with hardware is easy. It's not like what it
yes,
used to be. So you can do a lot with
yeah.
$30 of
Yeah,
random
yeah.
stuff.
Like
It's
I'm an
really
embedded engineer, so I see that's very interesting. And there's so many
yeah.
things now. If you want to go into IoT, then if you know how to work on the hardware, it's and there are now devices that we can buy and we can play on them. So
Yeah, and they're
Raspberry and
really
Arduino, we
cheap.
can try
They're
on
really
that.
cheap. Getting started is
Yes.
like $50 buys you months of
Yeah.
fun.
Yes.
Cool. So, well, again, thank you very much for joining us today. Richa Daga from Cisco, IoT expert, women's advocate, and a lot of other things, and underwater cable expert.
Thank you, Luca. It was such
And
an
for
interesting conversation today. Thank you so much.
thank you. And for the rest of the audience, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.